For this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at page 26 in the Alfred All-in-One Piano book, and the title of this page is Harmonic Intervals. Now, in the previous lesson, you were looking at page 24 with melodic intervals, and I spent quite a lot of time talking about what interval sizes are, what melody is. So let's just quickly review before we tackle harmonic intervals. Melody just means a succession of notes, one after the other. Harmony means that you play notes simultaneously. So here, for example, are a series of chords. Now, that word chord, it's not introduced in the book yet, but it just means a group of notes. That's the most generic definition of a chord, C-H-O-R-D. So here, for example, you have C and D. Middle C, and then D4, C4 and D4. Now, you know that they're played simultaneously because they share one stem, right? Remember that this is a half note, an open note head plus a stem. Usually, you know that pitches are played simultaneously because they are vertically aligned. Like, for example, this skip, C up to E. You see that vertical alignment. Now you might say, but look, this step, C up to D, is not vertically aligned. Well, that just has to do with notation, the graphical properties of how it has to be illustrated, because if the note heads are to be the same size, they really can't be one on top of the other. This first ledger line, if you can see right there, first ledger line below the staff, and then that first space below the staff, they would just be either overlapping, which music notation avoids, or they wouldn't be the same size, the note heads wouldn't be the same size if you could stack them vertically one on top of the other. So the compromise, so that it doesn't look so messy, is to have them aligned on the diagonal if they're steps, right? If they're harmonic steps. So for example, over here with the bass clef, this is F3, and G3 right above it, and you can see the same thing. They're aligned diagonally because to stack them vertically like you have here, or again in the right hand here, doesn't really work because it would just be graphically too messy. The note heads would be different sizes or they would overlap, and that's something that generally music notation tries to avoid, right? It's called something known as engraving rules, right? Overlapping note heads is against engraving rules. Okay, so let's just make sure that we can analyze what we're looking at. So C up to D is a step. Because it's played simultaneously, it's a harmonic second or a harmonic step. C up to E is a harmonic third or a harmonic skip. This measure is the same as this measure. Let's go over to the left hand. We've got F and G as we talked about before, which is a step, and then E on the third space, right below our reference F, right, a step below, and then up to G. So that's our harmonic skip. So let's play them. So in the right hand, this is C up to D, right? You simultaneously depress finger number 1 and finger number 2. And then the harmonic skip, you depress finger number 1 on C and finger number 3 on E. And then you repeat that in measure 2, right? Same exact thing. Let's go on to the left hand. So it's F and G, and then E and G, or fingers 1 and 2. G is 1, F is 2. And then the harmonic skip is G1, or first finger on G, and third finger on E. And then you repeat that in the final measure. Okay, so let's practice this opening exercise in time, right? These are all half notes, as you can see, so that gets 2 beats in our 4/4 time signature. And then at the end, you've got the double bar line, and what indicates the repeat are these double dots. So we just play it again. So let's do that. Okay, here we go. So the first line, it's played mezzo forte, as you can see. So 1, 2, ready, and 1, piece. Okay? So before we go on to this awesome piece, Rockin Intervals, we're going to burn a guitar by the end of this, I promise. Let's hear the sound of harmonic steps and harmonic skips with these notes, C and D, and then C and E. So here's the step. Kind of a crunchy sound, or what's called a dissonance, which we'll discuss in another lesson, or basically an unstable interval. And then a more stable, more pleasant, some might say prettier interval, the third. In the left hand, G and F is that dissonant, crunchy, unstable second. And then the more pleasing third, or consonant. So if this is a dissonance, doesn't sound that stable. This is the more stable third, or consonance. All right, it sounds more consonant. Okay, good. So you've kind of been getting used to the sound of these harmonic steps and skips. Let's take a look at the piece, Rockin Intervals. So we talked about this dynamic sign back on page 24. Even though it's not actually indicated here, you only get piano and mezzo forte. But in that lesson, I talked about the F in isolation, that forte. It just means loud, right? So if you're coming from, let's say, other languages, fuerte, right, in Spanish, means the same thing. It means strong. So forte in Italian means strong, or you depress the keys with some degree of force, right? A strong forcefulness, and that produces that big, loud, forte dynamic in music, okay? So let's work through this piece. Just like I did on page 24, I want to make sure that we get as much out of this visually and verbally before we play it, so that, and again, I'm going to belabor this point a lot because it's so important, so that we know what to expect and we know what to anticipate. It just makes learning music easier. Okay, so let's start with the first two measures, right? Because if you glance at these first two measures and then you glance down at these first two measures of system number 2, you'll see that there is something very similar about them. Well, not the pitches, right? Because this is F stepping down to E and then stepping down again to D. And this is E on the first line, stepping down to D and then stepping down to middle C on that first ledger line. Obviously, F, E, D and E, D, C are not the same, but the rhythms are the same. Half note, 2 quarters, quarter, quarter rest, quarter, quarter rest. If you've forgotten what this squiggly thing means, that's a quarter rest, and it was first introduced in the Mexican hat dance on page 21. I keep referencing that piece. Let's take a look. Do you recognize that same squiggle on the 4th beat of this measure? That's a quarter rest, or a 1-beat rest, given our time signature, where the bottom number 4 tells us the value of the beat. So the same thing is happening here, right? That's a quarter rest, quarter note, quarter rest. Well, look at these two measures. Aren't they the same? Rhythmically, half note, 2 quarters, quarter, quarter rest, quarter, quarter rest. So these two measures have identical rhythms. What's different about them? Well, actually, you know what? Before I talk about the difference, let me point out one other very crucial similarity. Remember how we went F, E, D, and this one went E, D, C? Those two patterns are the same in terms of their intervallic content. F steps down to E. E repeats as a unison. E continues by stepping down to D. D, after the quarter rest, repeats as a unison. So we have step, unison, step, unison. Take a look at this one. E steps down to D. D repeats as a unison. D steps down to C. After the quarter rest, C repeats as a unison. So we have the exact same, let's see if you remember this from page 24 with that lesson, we have the same melodic contour. The same intervallic properties in the same direction, right? A step down, unison, a step down. A step down, unison, a step down. So these two measures, these pairs, are actually very, very similar rhythmically in terms of the contour or the properties of the pattern. So what this tells us is that the only thing that's different is the starting point, right? This pattern or motive, remember because it repeats, this basic idea starts on F, and here it starts on E. There's a name for this. This is called a transposition. Remember from another lesson that a transposition is a pattern that's shifted to begin on a new pitch or a new letter. So in this case, the pattern is identical in terms of intervals and their directions, right? For example, a step down, another step down, etc. It's also identical in terms of rhythm, half, quarter, quarter, quarter rest. I've done this, I don't have to belabor this, but it just starts here on a new note. So take a listen to this. So we have this pattern here of F, E, and D. So I'm going to play this not exactly as written here, but just the three notes. Right, F, E, D, fingers 4, 3, 2. And then the next system begins with E and steps down to D and then to C. Can you hear that these are very closely aligned? So this is called a transpositional relationship. They're very similar. And this is something that occurs in a lot of music pretty consistently, because if you're a composer, for example, you don't really have to create something new to keep the music developing in time. All you have to do is repeat the pattern, but starting on a new note. You can keep going, etc., right? You're able to spin out the initial statement without really composing anything new. It's a very effective technique in music. But before we proceed on to the left hand in the second half of each system, let's just play this correctly rhythmically. So to practice, let's speak the rhythms, or speak rhythmically. Let's speak the letters, okay? So we know what they are, F and then E and then D. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, and F, E, E, D, rest, D, rest. Okay, you don't actually have to say the rest, I'm just saying it to be clear. So let's try that one more time without doing anything here other than taking a breath. Right there from F, ready, and F, E, E, D, D. Okay, let's do the same thing here. Just speaking the letters. Ready, and B, B, D, C, C. Okay, let's go back here and speak the fingers. 4, down to 3, down to 2. Ready, and 4, 3, 3, 2, 2. Let's do the same thing here with this transposition down a step. F shifts or transposes down a step to E. 3 on E, 2 on D, 1 on C. Ready? And 3, 2, 2, 1. 1. Let's play them, right? Keep that momentum going. So the first two measures, F down to E and D. So here we go as written. 1, 2, ready, and. And the second system, E, D, and C. Ready, and. Okay, let's play them a bit faster. And I'm no longer going to snap because you get how the rhythm operates. So preparatory beats, how about 1, 2, ready, and. Second system, ready, and. Okay, let's move on. Now, before I move on, you might be curious, why am I not going through this piece in chronological order? How come I'm not going measures 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8? You don't need to learn pieces that way. In fact, it makes more sense to learn like and like, rather than like and then something contrasting, right? So, in other words, put far more simply, you can divide a piece in whatever way makes logical sense to you. And then finally, when you learn it, you have to reassemble it so that everything is in fact in correct order. But at the beginning, it doesn't have to be that way. It's kind of like assembling, okay, I'm going to get myself into trouble because this is territory I don't know very well, but assembling a car or putting together a building. Not everything has to be assembled in the order that you eventually experience it in, right? So with a car, for example, God, this is about to be a very belabored analogy, but you might experience a car by first opening the door and sitting in the cockpit, right, in the driver's seat. But that's probably not the first thing that's assembled. It's probably the chassis or the foundation of the vehicle. And the same thing with a building. You walk into the front door, but that's not the first thing that's built, right? You have to build and dig that foundation. Otherwise, the building won't stand. So the same thing is true here. We don't need to learn the piece from beginning to end, and certainly not in order. First, it makes a lot more sense to observe things that are similar, like this transpositional relationship, and then we'll put everything in the correct order before we experience it performatively, right? Okay, I'm belaboring. You get the point. Let's go on to the next two measures of both systems. Make an observation. Look at the rhythms. Half note, 2 quarters, half note. Oops, I'm kidding. I hope you caught that mistake. Quarter, quarter rest, quarter, quarter rest. Look at these two measures. Half note, 2 quarters, quarter, quarter rest, quarter, quarter rest. They are identical. In fact, not only that, but isn't that the same rhythmic pattern that we have in these two measures? Half, 2 quarters, quarter, quarter rest, quarter, quarter rest. Absolutely. So this piece is actually a series of rhythmic units that get, or just a rhythmic unit that gets repeated once, twice, 3 times after its initial presentation. So in other words, 4 statements of the same rhythmic pattern. That's pretty cool because that's easy, number one, because it's the same thing over and over again. But it also gives the piece a lot of consistency and a kind of rhythmic unity. Okay, let's take a look at what's happening here. So the left hand first plays, the authors of the book are so nice. They tell you not only the letter names, F and G, but they also tell you the fingers, right? So this is 1 and 2, just like up here, followed by that harmonic skip, and then the harmonic step, repeated, right? So here's what this part sounds like. So we start with F and G, 1 and 2, and then 1 and 3. That's really it, right? Let's play it with the correct rhythm. Do you remember what that is? It's a half note, 1, 2, then 2 quarters, back to the harmonic step, rest, rest. Okay, now that was not perfectly in time because I had to speak over it, but here's the beat. 1, 2, same 2 measures, ready, and. Okay, and these 2 measures at the end of the second system, well, the thing is, this is not a transposition of that, because it's not quite the same pattern shifted. It's really more of a reversal. That is, the opening step, harmonic step, is here replaced with a harmonic skip. These harmonic skips or thirds are substituted with the step, and then these steps are replaced with skips. So we're just changing the pattern a bit. So let's try that out. We start with, so again, in the last two measures of system 2, we start with the harmonic skip on G and E, 1 and 3. We go up to the harmonic step twice. Harmonic skip, rest, rest. Okay, so let's play that in time. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so again, these pairs of measures are not related transpositionally, but they are related in that they're using the same harmonic chords. Remember that word chord? It just means a group of notes or a collection of pitches. That's all. All right, so we have all the building blocks of this piece, right? We have every two-measure unit learned. Now we have to put them together. Okay, so let's try that. We're going to start with the first system. We're going to play the right hand and then immediately continue with the left hand. So here's what that sounds like. So remember the right hand on 4 on F, 3 on E, 2 on D, the left hand. Okay, so that's not the piece, that's just blocking out, making sure I remember what to play. But here we go. So it's forte, it's loud. System number 1. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, pretty straightforward. Practice that. One of the hardest things initially might just be continuing in time from the right hand transitioning to the left hand. But just keep counting over it. So let me play that one more time, counting over it. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if you're new to this, it's going to take some time for you to coordinate playing and speaking or counting, but the more you practice it, the easier it will get. System number 2. Remember, the first two measures on the right hand are E, D, C. The left hand starts with that harmonic skip and then goes up to the step and back down to the skip. Okay, so let's try that in time, and I'm just going to count over it. 1, 2, ready, and. Didn't I say I would count over it and I just completely didn't do that? Let me do that one more time, counting over it. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes I just say something and I just blank out completely. I just don't do it. But I remembered, I caught it, I did it. What happens when you get to the end? You've got to repeat, right? So let me play the whole thing, then I'm going to repeat. So to help you, the first time I play it, I'm going to count over it, and I really will. I'll remember this time, and then when I repeat, I will no longer count because you really don't need that by that point. Okay, so here we go. The entire piece, one system following the previous. So system number 2, without any delay, following system number 1. 1, 2, ready, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, is. That's Rockin Intervals. Now, if you really want to make it a little more rockin', I guess, it can go faster, right? There's a little bit of this kind of mood indicator. It's going to be bright, right? Which I don't know really what that means. I guess fast, exciting. Before we leave this page and this lesson, there's a duet part. That doesn't happen very often in the initial pages of this book, but it's pretty cool that you can actually play this. If you're advanced enough, you can play this material with one hand, for example, the right hand, and this material with the left hand simultaneously with this. If you're not that advanced, get a friend and or maybe play with me. Like I'll play this duet part by itself, and you can play with me. I'll be on this end of the camera, of the screen. You'll be on the other. But let's try it out. So just so you're clear what this all means. RH, right hand, LH, left hand. Forte is the dynamic. 4/4 is the time signature, bass clef, and essentially the stems down indicate the left hand playing, and the stems up indicate the right hand playing. And do you see how there's a vertical alignment between the quarter and the quarter rest, quarter and the quarter rest? This essentially means that when one hand is playing, the other hand is resting. So you're probably not, if you're a beginner here, you're probably not too happy to see all these ledger lines. But I know you can figure it out. Review my lessons on music notation and the staff. But essentially, just to save you some time, this is G, all the way down here. Okay? This is G an octave above. This is B, and then B an octave above, and then D and D an octave above. Okay, and then it skips down to B, B, and again G, G, and you can see this pattern repeats for these initial 1, 2, 3, 4 measures. So you play G, G, B, B, D, D, down to B, B, G, G, back up, B, B, D, D, B, B. So if I'm going to play both hands as it tells me to do, I would play 5, 3, and 1 for the left hand, G, B, D, and 1, 3, 5 for the right hand, and it would sound like this. Okay, now it's a little bit advanced, so if you're not quite ready for this, don't worry about it, but that's the first 4 measures. And then for the remaining 4 measures, what corresponds to these 4 measures in Rockin Intervals, right, for the second system, you play a series of steps. C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F, and then you step down back to C. E, E, D, D, C, 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 C. So that sounds like this. If you're going to play with both hands, C starts on 5, right? You recognize that this is C4, C3, C2. The right hand starts on C3. And so your left hand will play 5, 4, 3, 2, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then back down 3, 4, 5. Your right hand will play 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. But remember, they're alternating left, right, so it sounds like this. All together, this entire duet part sounds like this. And then, because Rockin Intervals repeats, so does the duet part. So I would have to play what I just did twice over. Now, let me play it for you twice over so that you can use this as a kind of background track so that you can match Rockin Intervals over it. And remember, I'm playing just a series of quarter notes. So in other words, instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, this accompaniment accomplishes the same thing musically because I'm playing on every beat. So this is basically a musical metronome. All right, so let me play it for those of you who are interested with both hands, and I'll play it twice so you can play over this. So 1, 2, ready, and. Use that as you play over. Now, what if you're super advanced and you're coming back to this after having learned a lot of music and you want to try the other option, which is where you play this entire part with one hand and this entire part with one hand. Okay, so this is advanced. If you're not ready for this, you can stop the video. But if you're interested, let's practice that, put it together, and see how it goes. So first, I'm going to go back here and just play this with one hand. So the way to do this is essentially you play 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, right? Because we're doing octaves, so it's just 5 and 1, the extremes of our hand, 5 to 1. And then for the stepwise progression, it's the same thing, it's 5 and 1. Okay, so all together, the duet part with just one hand sounds like this. Repeats, of course. Okay, but before we worry about any of those repetitions, let's see if we can play Rockin Intervals with just one hand. So this is the challenge. Okay, so obviously the first two measures right hand of each system. The left hand part, though, we'll now have to play with the right hand. So here's how we're going to do it. So the left hand parts, as you know, are 1 and 2, and then 1 and 3. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, there are a number of ways to do this, but perhaps the way that's most consistent with what you're learning so far is we're going to take our right hand 5-finger position on C4 and transpose or shift it down 1 octave. So we're going to play the same notes in the same register, right, F3 and G3, but with fingers 4 and 5. And 3 and 5. Okay, so the first system is going to sound like this. 1, 2, ready, and. The second system, well, we begin with the right hand, obviously, this part. But the left hand, which was on G and E or G and F, well, just like before, it's either going to be 5 and 3 or 5 and 4. So the last two measures in system number 2 will sound like this. So all of system 2 just played with the right hand. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so the entire piece played just with the right hand sounds like this. 1, 2, ready, and. that's pretty advanced. I'm not going to lie. You may not be remotely ready to do this just yet, not because you don't understand what's happening, but because from my perspective, I think the hardest thing is to throw the hand from this, move the hand from this register, the fourth octave, down to the third octave and not miss, right? Certainly you can do this slowly, as in play the first two measures. Give yourself time. And so on. But initially, it's just this shift down the octave and then back up the octave when you begin system number 2 that might be a real challenge. But since you're here and still following me, let's see if we can finish the lesson. So the right hand is playing Rockin Intervals. The left hand is playing the duet part. Let's see if we can put them together. So just to give you a sense of short bursts, the first measure would sound like this. All right, that wasn't too bad. The second measure, the next measure, the next measure, and then here's where it's going to be interesting because the hands are almost going to get in each other's way in the second half of system 2. And you see what I mean? Here, this is the beginning of the third measure of system 2. The right hand has to play E and G. The left hand starts with this E down here and has to go up an octave. And so the right hand has to just get out of the way. See that again? Technically, the right hand here is playing a half note. So it has to stay down, but that's just physically impossible if the left hand, using the same keyboard at least, has to get to that E. So you'll have to release. Okay, so there are some compromises sometimes that have to be made, but it's not really going to affect the piece negatively, right? It's just something to keep in mind. So let's play it. 1, 2, ready, and. And that's playing Rockin Intervals with the piece itself played with the right hand and the duet part, instead of two hands, played with just the left hand. Now, I know it says here student plays 1 octave higher, so you could take all of this if you actually had 2 separate keyboards and move this up an octave. So instead of here, you could play it here, but that's not going to be possible if you're playing Rockin Intervals using the registers in which this is actually notated. You would have to, if you're going to play this on a single keyboard, you would have to move the right hand, well, for both of these parts, up an octave. So you'd end up playing everything transposed up an octave up here, if the left hand is up an octave from the way it's notated. I don't know about you, but I don't know, that doesn't sound very rockin'. That just sounds, I don't know, it sounds a little silly. I think it's better in the original registers. Yeah, just better. But again, that's somewhat subjective, but that's my opinion. In any case, try this, right? So if you're up for that challenge, try learning how to play Rockin Intervals just with one hand, the right hand, and try playing this duet part with the left hand. But if you don't feel comfortable with this yet, come back to this after advancing further in the book and in your piano studies, and then see how it goes. Either way, it'll be fun. and a nice challenge.